Hey guys, JD here with the 2022 Kawasaki Ultra 310 series jet ski. Today, we'll be inspecting the supercharger drive belt as well as the tensioner and idler assembly. In order to do that, we're going to have to remove the shroud over the belt as well as the belt idler and tensioner assembly. We'll also have to remove the catch can and associated hoses. Removing the catch can is easy, requiring just two 10mm nuts. You'll also have to remove this line from the airbox on the top of the catch can, this line from the crankcase on the middle of the catch can, as well as an oil return line on the bottom of the catch can. Using a pliers, carefully release each hose clamp and remove the hoses from the catch can. Now that you removed all the hoses, the next step is to remove the two 10mm nuts holding the catch can in place. Once you remove the hose clamp on the bottom of the catch can, have a paper towel ready to catch any oil or fluids that may spill out. Once you have the catch can out of the ski, use this as an opportunity for a quick inspection to make sure there's no damage or corrosion forming on the can. This is also a good opportunity to inspect and clean the outer body of your intercooler, as well as the cooling lines and components located underneath the catch can. Now that the catch can is out of the way, we can access the two bolts holding the plastic belt cover shroud in place. The first one is right here. Both require a 10mm socket to remove. It's easier with two hands, obviously. I'm just trying to film this for you guys. So there's another, you can see we've got that bolt off. This here is the ground for the ignition coils, just, put that to the side. There is another bolt holding this on. I can't see it here, but you just got to feel around for it. When you get that second 10mm bolt out, be careful because it has two washers on it. Try not to drop them into the bilge. So after some wrangling, you should be able to get the plastic belt cover out of the engine compartment. I have this open. I've got some dish soap and a scrubber, and I'm just going to go in here and clean everything up. Now I'm going to rinse everything off here. You just want to do a very light spray to get everything clean. Obviously make sure to try to not get water into any of those hoses you removed from the catch can. Now I'm going to get a rag and we're going to dry this down. I'm going to take the rag and just dry down all the main components in here. I'm also going to leave the ski open out here so it can dry before I put the cover on and close up the compartments. I wanted to give you a good shot of the supercharger tensioner assembly and damper, as well as the main drive shaft, the idler pulley, and the supercharger pulley. Place your 19mm socket on the adjuster nut here. This releases the tension on the spring and allows you to slip the belt off. To loosen the tension on the belt, you want to make sure that you push your breaker bar away from the exhaust. So you want to push it that way. So you can see the belt is now loose. It's easier to pull it off of the idler pulley first and then slip it off of the main drive pulley here. So I'm just going to show you loosening. This is the main pivot bushing nut. We're going to loosen this one, and then this holds the spring on. We're going to take this one off too. Some people might need a breaker bar to remove this. I was able to do it with a 14mm wrench. Make sure to loosen the nut and then remove it by hand. Take the nut and washer off, being careful not to drop them in the bilge. Now that we've removed the bottom nut with a 14mm wrench, use a 12mm wrench to loosen the upper nut. For this video, I've already loosened it, and I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes how to get it off. Make sure you don't drop the hardware into the bilge when removing it. Now that you've loosened the hardware holding the idler and tensioner assembly in place, remove it from the ski, sliding it off of the bushing shafts. Inspect the belt closely for fraying, cracking, or tearing. Okay, so we cleaned up the bilge a little bit. We cleaned off the belt and the pulleys. And so now you can see both those bushing rods there. They're completely dry, no grease at all. There was no grease on the pivot bushing or on the spring bushing. So what we're going to do is I've got this product. It's called Corrosion Block Waterproof Grease. Highly recommend it for anything in marine applications. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use these. You could use your fingers. Just work it into the threads there and onto the bushing shaft there. Once you remove the tensioner assembly from the ski, you still have to unassemble the main pivot bushing in order to grease it. I'll show you how to do this next. Alright, so now that you've got the idler and dampener assembly out of the ski, what we have to do is unassemble this pivot bushing right here in order to lube the inside of the component. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to flip this over, and I suggest you position it on a side of a block of wood just like that. Then right here, this is just a 3/8 socket. Fits directly over the dowel in the center there. So I'm going to try to do this with one hand here. So give that a good tap. This washer will come right off. You can see there's an O-ring right in there. You can see I don't know what this black stuff is in there, but I'm going to set that to the side. Then this bushing here literally, as you will see from the video, slides right out. I'm going to clean this up with a rag. I'm going to apply some grease, and we're going to put it all back together. So I'm going to try to show you here. So that, make sure that you grease that up really well before you insert it back in. You can see I have extra grease around the edge there. Then you're going to put your O-ring back in place and put the washer back in place. Now you can see that this point moves freely. Well, we've fully greased the bushing here on the tensioner assembly, and we're now going to put this back in the ski. Once you have the assembly back in place, it's time to reinstall the nuts and hardware holding it on, torque them into place, and then use our breaker bar to untension the spring and reinstall the drive belt. Tighten the main pivot bushing nut to 33 foot-pounds. Ensure not to over-tighten the nut, as this can cause damage. And the top dampener nut is going to be tightened to 22 foot-pounds. So right about there. And our marks line up. So now that we've got everything back in place, we've got everything properly torqued, it's now time to put the catch can back in place. You can see there's a nice healthy bead of grease inside the bushing now, and we've also got the shafts greased as well, because these will tend to move on those shafts, so it's good to have everything greased. Now we're just going to put the belt back on and we'll be good to go. It's hard to do this with one hand, but I'm going to try to show you here. So you've got your breaker bar holding the idler pulley open, and then you got your belt in place, and you're going to slowly release. Take your breaker bar out, do an inspection, make sure that your belt, you got it on properly. Belt's reinstalled, everything's tightened, everything's greased. I am not going to reinstall the plastic shroud that comes stock with the ski to cover the belt. I also want to be able to make sure to treat all these components with corrosion blocks so they don't corrode you. Make sure that if you remove the plastic shroud like I did, either way, if you remove it or you install it, make sure that you tighten this 10mm nut along with the ground wire for the ignition right there. Make sure that's nice and tight. Make sure to tighten the catch can the same way you took it off, and reconnect the hoses, the bottom hose first and the hose clamp. You can use pliers like this to get the hose clamps on and off, or you can use your fingers. Now we're going to add this hose here that comes from the air box. Get it on there tightly. Then if you need pliers like this, tighten your clamps. All right, so we got the catch can reconnected, all 3 clamps. And we've got everything torqued and tightened, and that's it. If you like this video, click the like button and subscribe for more Kawasaki content.